drives, and one of them will reduce the size of the city council from 14 to 8 seats. And everybody ought to think long and hard about whether you want to do that, considering the diversity of this city. I've been around a long time. I think we're ready to go. Are we ready to go? Headphones are going on. That's a good sign. Are we good? We're good? Okay. Apologize for the delay, everyone, and good evening. My name is Jane Miller. I am a member of the board of the Canton Community Association, longtime resident of 21224, formerly with WBAL Television, and now I host a Saturday radio show. Hope you all listen to it on WBAL Radio. This candidates forum for the 1st District City Council seat is being sponsored by the associations of Brewers Hill, Canton, Patterson Park, Fells Prospect, Fells Point, Friends of Patterson Park, and the Highlandtown Neighbors Association. Thank you all. Our candidates tonight running for the seat in the 1st District are Mark Parker, Joe Kohler, and Liam Davis. Here are the rules. Candidates will have 90 seconds for an opening statement. Then there will be 90 seconds to answer a question. There may be 60 seconds for rebuttal if I decide there should be rebuttal in something. It's because I'm the moderator, right? And then at the end, we'll have 2 minutes for closing, for a closing statement. We have been collecting some questions here as we go along. If you have some more, you can send them up here. But let's get started. We're going to start in alphabetical order with Liam and an opening statement.
Hey folks, Liam Davis, obviously candidate for 1st District City Council, and I just want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to us candidates. This really is probably the most competitive individual district race in the whole city right now. And I think part of that's because all 3 of us here have tremendous community leadership experience, and we're all working very hard. I am so excited about my vision for the city, which honestly has been the vision has been aided by our conversations with the public at the doors, and I look forward to having a deep dive tonight into these really important topics. And once again, thank you so much for being here.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Kohler. Many of you know me because I look around this room and I see a bunch of people who have volunteered with me and also my fellow candidates. Thank you, Jane Miller. Thank you, everyone who is part of a community association that showed up tonight. I'm running because I feel we're at a very critical point from a financial sustainability point. We are losing population, and we are the second. We are losing population almost more than any other city in the country. The only other city that is losing more population is St. Louis. And one of the things that I want to ask to this audience is, does just by a show of hands, do you feel that public safety is an issue here in District 1? All right, so our campaign's knocked 16,000 doors, and the overwhelming response is that public safety is the #1 issue. As the public safety chair for Canton, as also a member of the CRC board with the Southeast District for the last 7 years, I believe that I am the right fit for this district as a CPA, as a former auditor, and also as a controller for small and large businesses. I believe that I will be able to assist and add value to the city government.
Good evening. My name is Mark Parker. I'm a Baltimore native, grew up in South Baltimore, and have been serving here in Highlandtown, raising my family since 2009, so it's been 15 years this summer, serving in public leadership here in the community as a pastor of a queer-affirming progressive congregation. This is not a traditional path to elected office, but for me, it's all about, and has always been about, public service, right? About seeking opportunities to effectively represent, serve, and transform our communities in ways that strengthen it for us and for those who come after us. My work has been about showing up for neighbors and with neighbors in all kinds of situations and all kinds of circumstances, right? To listen and to learn, to solve problems, to make connections, to build teams and partnerships capable of creating real change, to work over the long term to address real needs and build stronger communities, to get real tangible things done. A preschool serving 50 families in Highlandtown, housing and support for refugees, newly renovated homes that were formerly vacant, work opportunities, scholarships, and mentoring for young people, thousands of meals and groceries for hundreds of families during the pandemic, as well as vaccinations and eviction prevention, connecting people with jobs to support their families, real tangible change, 15 years of that kind of work, right? You know this because this is work we've done together. It's always work that we do together. And it's time for me to continue that work in a new way alongside all of you. We're currently hiring to replace me and to hire a new lead pastor at Breath of God Lutheran Church. I look forward to spending the next years of my life continuing to serve alongside you in the community.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you all for your opening statements. I want to start with a couple of questions about the Key Bridge, which is going to be a very big topic of conversation for some time to come. First question, the collapse of the bridge is obviously an unprecedented catastrophe. Do you think the city's response has been effective and adequate? And if not, where are the rooms for improvement? Let's start again with Liam, and then we'll come down the road.
It's a great question, and as I get started, I do want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims of the tragedy. It is unprecedented, Jane, and I know everyone in this room, including myself, was surprised when we woke up to the news of what had happened. In terms of the city doing a better response, I'll say, in general, I am impressed with the city working with the state and our federal partners. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement, and we're still really in the earliest stages of this coming out of this. Right now, we're still focused on recovery, but we also have to focus on getting the channel back open. We have thousands of port workers and associated workers who need to have money to put food on the table. So I really do think the city and state and our federal partners have to come together to make sure our port workers and affected workers are compensated so they can afford to support their families. And we also have to have a longer term discussion about the future of the bridge rebuild itself. And let me tell you, this isn't going to be done in 2 years. My experience in city DOT, this is at least an 8 to 12-year project that is going to be before us. So we have a lot of work ahead, and I look forward to helping as the next city council person.
Joe, same question.
Thank you. The mayor's office did release an action plan, and I actually do think it's pretty adequate. It's going to be upgraded over time. So there's $1 million being released right now to the port workers and hopefully by the end of May, they will be back to work. But in the meantime, there's supposed to be a second round of $1 million that's supposed to go to them. Also, they are working with a bunch of local nonprofits to make sure that they are working with the different families that were impacted by this, and also having additional aid for rent, for utilities, etc. So they are acting, and also they are working, as Liam said, with both the state and the federal level.
We have a long road ahead of us to rebuild and recover. I think, as mentioned, the city-state federal partnerships have been really strong. It's been really encouraging to see people work together. This is something that transcends any capacity of any one level of government to take on, and so I'm really encouraged by that collective leadership and collaborative leadership, which we see in Maryland, but is rare to see around the country. I think there's 3 things to mention. One is to take note of the reality that it was vulnerable immigrant workers who were there doing that work in really dangerous conditions with a lot of lack of protection there that night. This should be a wake-up call for our city and for our district to make sure that all workers, whatever their status as migrants or as newcomers to our city, have the equal protection of the law, have the opportunity to work and to serve and raise a family here. And so I want to make sure that that's front and center for the city's response as we move forward. The other thing that's critically important is that I've heard from a lot of leaders within port-related industries that the mayor's office, the mayor in particular, has struggled to fully understand and grasp the impact on them and on their business. That's not something that the mayor has a strong background in, and so I think it's really important that a first district council person representing so many of those industries has direct functional working relationships and can help manage the recovery process alongside our port industries.
You mentioned the immigrant community, and we do have a question for the audience about the city seems to be about to make the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs a permanent. How would you work with that office to serve and support the immigrant community? Joe, you have the first crack at this one.
Sure. So I would definitely be working hand in hand with any government agency, any office that the mayor has. I would set up a meeting with them right away and write an outline of what needs to be done and task that with my team. And we would have follow-up meetings accordingly. But I would also want to make sure that I would be working with a couple of members of my team too who have experience directly with this. If I do get elected, I'm gonna have someone on my staff who is a social worker, and I'm gonna have somebody on my staff who also is fluent in Spanish as well.
Mark?
Yeah, I've worked really closely with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs for more than 12 years. I speak Spanish and work really closely with our immigrant community and refugee community in Southeast Baltimore. Catalina Rodriguez Lima is a good friend and colleague. She lives here in the district on Linwood Avenue and raising her family here. And so I'm glad to have those personal ties as well as a long track record of shared support. I offer testimony in favor of making MEMA a permanent agency, a permanent office here in the city. MEMA has existed in a kind of an iffy situation where any new mayor coming in could decide that all of a sudden that's not a priority and wouldn't receive any budgetary support or leadership. And this is critically important for our district, where 20% of our neighbors are Latino, but for the city overall, where we're trying to grow this city. That growth is not primarily composed of luxury apartments. It's families that want to move here, stay here, and raise a family here and take care of folks. So that's critically important to make sure that we do that. The last thing is we can't treat MEMA like a token agency, that just because we have it as a permanent place, that's taking care of all of the needs of our immigrant community. Ideally, we are empowering MEMA to help the entire city of Baltimore, all of our institutions, better understand, develop cultural competence, develop language skills, work for and work alongside our immigrant community so that every part of our city can be responsive and can provide real opportunity to all our residents, no matter their background.
Liam?
Yes, I think this is a great development, and I want to say, you know, immigration is the lifeblood and the backbone of this country, and I'm proud to be a resident of Greektown, which has a very deep and rich history of immigration that evolves and changes over time. It's very dynamic, so I think this is an excellent development. I really think we have to look at expanding the budget and expanding the scope. I think we need to do a better job of training all of our staff within our city agencies to make sure they're competent and fully knowledgeable of how they can really, truly, effectively govern and reach out and be helpful to our immigrant community. I also think public outreach is a big deal. I know that when I was the president of Greektown, it was a bit of a struggle having that language barrier, and having a more robust MEMA will help us do a better job on the community side of engaging all of our residents here. So I think, again, this is an excellent development, and I'm very happy to hear the news.
Talk a bit about crime. Many have been very concerned about an uptick over the past year and a half in car theft, carjackings, although both of those categories have started now to subside. The city has sued 2 manufacturers for failing to include anti-theft technology. It has regularly provided steering wheel locks. Saw somebody in the parking lot with one, actually. Is there more the city could do to prevent these crimes? Mark, I think yes.
Specific to carjacking and car theft?
These are specifically, car theft. Let's specifically talk about car theft.
Yeah, no, it's been a really difficult situation the city has been in, and even more so our neighbors and communities. It's been a constant conversation across the district and all of our conversations there. I think you do 2 things. One, I mean, you try to hold the folks accountable, the manufacturers accountable for putting out products that aren't safe and lead to not only the car thefts themselves, but a bunch of associated strings of robberies and carjackings and other kind of escalating crimes that resulted from young people driving around in cars that didn't belong to them. You work to harden targets, right? So that's certainly in terms of making sure that cars get updated and that they have steering wheel locks and all the rest there. It's also about making sure that we are effectively collaborating as community organizations and as community members, whether that's using cameras or sharing information, taking advantage of the state public safety grants that we've used in Highlandtown and we've been using across the entire district to add camera capacity, to add license plate readers. So Highlandtown Community Association put up $70,000 from our grant to put an LPR here in the community, precisely to be able to help police effectively, quickly track down those vehicles, and not just find them abandoned, but find the people responsible still in them so they can be held accountable and behaviors can change.
Liam. Joe, did I skip over you? No, go ahead. It's like, go ahead.
All right, so I'll say this. One of the things that I don't think gets talked about a lot on this topic is when you're the victim of a crime involving your car, whether it's a larceny or the car stolen, it's more than just an inconvenience. I mean, a lot of us, I know me personally, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and a $500 deductible is not a small expense. So we really do have to make this a priority. I do think the use of license plate readers by BPD is something that I would like to pursue. I'm more comfortable with the city managing the surveillance technology because the city has law department and standards that are centralized, whereas community organizations, I do like the safety grants that are out there, but each organization is going to have a different way they manage the surveillance. I think license plate readers should be managed by BPD. We should be working very closely with them. And I do think we need to work with the people who are caught to get them to understand, like, hey, this is really, you're harming the city in so many ways. We have to help push and encourage pride in our city and make sure that there's almost like a tough love situation. If you get caught, if you're a young kid caught stealing someone's car, I don't want hard jail time, but I want you out there picking up trash. I want you contributing back to society.
Joe.
So this is actually part of why I'm running. We saw an uptick in the carjackings. We saw an uptick in auto theft back in May of last year. A month later is when I decided to run. We need to do something about it. I'm very appreciative of the actions between the state's attorney's office and now DJS. I feel like they're starting to work better together, but this is why I'm running. We need to make sure that there are consequences for breaking the law. We need to address the recidivism issue in this city. We need to also start holding parents accountable, as Ivan Bates said. This is not coming from me. This is Ivan Bates who just said this in a conference. And I will work every day with this team to make sure. And I need to be on the Public Safety Committee. I have to be on that committee to make sure that we are addressing this issue. And then talking to social workers, and I told you I'm going to hire a social worker to be on my team. It's not good, as Liam said, it's not good for people to be locked up, kids to be locked up for 4 to 6 months at a time. We need to the extent that we can, there needs to be the process to go to informal, where they're doing not just community service, as he said, but community service in their communities. We need to improve the communities that need the most help, and that's what I'm going to make sure that we're doing.
Sticking with crime for a second, the city has seen significant reduction in gun violence, both homicides and shootings, over the past 18 months, 24 months. Do you support the current administration's current initiatives to sustain the reduction, or does the city need to go in a different direction? Mark, let's start with you.
I've been really encouraged, as I think all of us have been who've been in the city for any length of time, to see not only a slightly year-over-year decline, but a massive decrease between 2022 and 2023, continuing now into this year. Yes, I'm very supportive of the mayor's approach and of the work that he and Commissioner Worley and State Attorney Ivan Bates, when they can talk to each other, are doing with each other. I think the group violence reduction strategy in particular has shown great promise. It showed great promise in its pilot stage in particular communities, and as it's been implemented more broadly across the city, has been really important. I'm incredibly supportive of the 988 community social work, community-based response effort, so that people who are experiencing distress, mental health, addiction, and other things can have people responding there that are capable of working alongside them and intervening in a crisis situation. I know that's been called for a long time by neighbors here in Highlandtown, where we have a lot of people experiencing distress, especially from addiction. And so to have that as a supplement to and allow the police department then to focus truly on violent crime reduction strategies and allowing other kinds of community needs to be addressed by people who have the qualifications to do that kind of work.
Joe?
Can you actually repeat the very, very first part of the question? I missed it.
The city has seen significant reductions in gun violence. Do you support the administration's current strategy, or does the city need to go in a different direction?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, so to an extent. So one thing that I've liked that the mayor has done is the blitz on the western part of the district, where there's a majority of the crime that's happening in the city. I think that has been good. We need to see a better response, I think, though, from our federal government when it comes to gun crime as well. We can't do it alone. We need better support when it comes to illegal guns, which, let's face it, all the shootings that happen in the city and all the murders that happen, homicides that happen in the city are coming from illegal guns, not legal guns. So we have to address that issue and where they're coming from. And it can't just be Baltimore City Police that does this. It needs to also be our federal partners and our state partners, our other state partners as well. And then the other thing I would say too is I would really like to see a better approach in terms of community policing. So if Commissioner Worley's actually serious about having 40% of the time community policing, we need to make sure that we have more than just one police officer per police post, and that somebody who's had their house broken into isn't waiting an entire hour for them to show up.
Great. So I do support the administration's approach to crime, and I'm very impressed with the numbers. So I'm all for expanding GVRS to other districts around the city, and I am very impressed with Commissioner Worley. I remember working with him in my years as a community liaison when he was the mayor of Northeast Baltimore. And I think a lot of times we're always chasing the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, when we should be giving our leaders time to implement their strategies. And it seems like after 3-4 years of the Scott administration, we are seeing the fruits of our labor. Now, I do agree with Joe on targeting illicit guns and gun suppliers. We do need federal help there and probably some state help. But I would also like to see us prioritize enforcing more traffic laws to get the lawlessness on the streets down, and then also making sure that we are putting our officers in a position to be effective detectives and actually solve crimes. That's what people want. They want people to actually have their crimes solved.
Speaking of traffic, and we'll start with you, Liam. It's kind of down your alley. Obviously, pedestrian and traffic safety are huge concerns, not just in our community, but really everywhere. What initiatives would you support to calm traffic on our worst culprit of streets in the district? And well, let's start there, and then I'll ask a second question. So Liam, go ahead.
So there's a quick-term approach and there's a longer-term approach. And I saw that Delegate Mark Edelson was in here. I don't know if he can raise his hand. He's over there. He is. So I know that working with our partners in Annapolis the past several years, we were able to secure additional highway user revenue dollars. And that's critical. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be coming in that can actually be leveraged for additional federal dollars to overhaul our public right-of-way, implement complete streets, do streetscapes that actually do permanent traffic calming, that allow our corridors to be ADA compliant, and expand the sidewalks to make them more pedestrian friendly, and do permanent installations rather than just flex posts and paint. We need to do all of this. It costs a lot of money, so the first thing is really getting those capital dollars. The second thing we really need to do is a central pillar of my platform, which is attracting and retaining talent in city government. When I first joined City DOT in 2019, we had 3 traffic engineers for the entire city. And people wonder why it took so long to get a traffic calming request reviewed, let alone approved. So it's about attracting and retaining talent in city government, it's about collaborating with our communities, and it's about securing capital dollars to build the projects out.
Joe?
I agree with the complete streets. We need to make that a priority. I also have this on my platform. I want to see more speed cameras and red light cameras. And Liam and I were at another forum where we talked about this strategy. The problem, though, is all this money goes to police overtime. And so because we have an inadequacy with our police department, all the money is going there. I'd like to see that money instead go to the synchronization of traffic lights in our city. Too often do I live on Conkling Street, and I used to live on Boston Street where Jane lives. And I've just seen cars flying 70 miles per hour. We need more cameras. And the only way we can, and I feel also that when I see them flying through these lights, they're kind of counting down. You probably know what I'm talking about. When you guys go through the traffic lights, you can see the countdown, and people are speeding up. On top of that, there's an inconsistency, though, in our traffic patterns. And there's a traffic light, a stop sign, a traffic light, a stop sign on Conkling, and people are just flying through them, and we need more cameras.
So speed is what drives unsafe roads, right? It's all about how are we controlling speed? How are we, both by our enforcement mechanisms, by our road design, and by our laws, what are we doing to lower speed in residential areas where it really puts people at risk, both the people driving, but especially people going by. I spent a good amount of time today walking Baltimore Street with a fellow parent from Patterson Park Public Charter School who had seen somebody pull into the opposite lane of traffic at a red light, blow past 4 cars during school drop-off period, and blow through the red light and up the street, right? Almost hitting the crossing guard and the people crossing Baltimore Street from the park into the school. That same stretch of Baltimore Street saw a cyclist hit and injured just this past week. Again, on what passes for bike infrastructure in our city, which is, as Leah mentioned, a piece of paint on the ground that says, hey, bikes can ride here in this little 2-foot area on the side of the street and try not to die, right? So speed is what we need to focus on, right? We do that, one, by lowering the speed limit on residential streets in the city. Other cities are doing this. It has real results, dropping it from 25 to 20 miles per hour on residential streets. There's no reason to be tearing through Highlandtown or tearing through Greektown on Newkirk at 25 miles per hour, right? It just doesn't work. Also the way that we design our streets, right? The way that we narrow streets, create bump outs and all the rest, we have some control there too.
So a follow-up question on this. Some streets, Boston being one of them, have parking restrictions at rush hour, which could create really raceway conditions. Do you support lifting them? In other words, allowing parking at all times. Let's start with Mark.
Yeah, I think we have, so Boston Street is one, O'Donnell Street's another, stretches of Eastern Avenue here in our district, and then on the north side, Monument Street, Orleans Street, Pulaski Highway. We have roads that we have designed for really high speeds and have encouraged really high speeds as a way of facilitating commuter traffic. I'm not running to represent commuters from the county. I'm running to represent this city and our neighbors here. And so absolutely, I think we need to seriously reconsider the way in which we design both the streets themselves as well as the regulations, whether it's parking or other things, on those stretches to return them to a safer use that prioritizes human beings over people and vehicles.
Joe?
Absolutely. I used to live on Boston Street. I also, and witnessed what she's describing, I also have been hit by a car at one point in time. Now, it was fine. It wasn't very bad. But I absolutely believe in that we should have cars parked there at all times. I'll do one better, too. Going out towards Alisana and Chester and Fleet, those intersections there, I'd actually like to see a possible design for 2 traffic circles there that would also address the other issue, which is trucks going down illegally down these roads. No truck would be able to go through those traffic circles as well.
Liam?
So yes, the topic of parking restrictions is very near and dear to my heart as the legislative affairs manager of City DOT, where Councilwoman Ramos actually pushed to remove the restrictions throughout her entire district. And while we worked very closely with the councilwoman, and we were able to remove, I think, like 80 to 90% of them, the important thing we have to understand is we're the legislators, we're the policymakers, but the agencies are filled with the subject matter experts. We should be working with them to identify the ideal areas where to do it. Now, Boston Street, I think it could work, but there's a lot of other factors that we have to consider. You have the potential of the red line. I know when we were working with Councilwoman Ramos on York Road, she was pushing us to remove the parking restrictions, and MTA was concerned that if we removed the parking restrictions, people got used to parking there, their future efforts to do dedicated bus lanes for a rapid bus line could be hampered from future community opposition. So we have to understand, as politicians, we don't have all the answers. Let's talk to the communities to see what they want, connect them with the city agencies, get the engineers to look at this, and then we can come up with the best plan possible for the future of the city.
You know, you mentioned traffic patterns, et cetera. This gets back to the Key Bridge loss. One thing that has been discussed, thought about, is whether the city needs to lift restrictions to allow trucks to come through city neighborhoods. Joe, what do you think of that?
Yeah, so I based on the design I just came up with, I really don't want to see that happen. We have our truck routes. Another thing I failed to mention too is, given the lack of police that we have right now, we're over 500 short on patrol. I want to see some aid from the state. We're the only jurisdiction in this state that does not have a state trooper barracks. I think there's room for it between the 2 tunnels. And what could they do? They could do traffic enforcement. They could make sure that trucks aren't going on illegal routes. They could also run tags, pull people over, and confiscate illegal guns and illegal drugs. So that's another thing that I really want to advocate for. I'm also in favor for Brandon Scott's policy for more parking enforcement as well.
Mark?
Yeah. The response to the collapse of the bridge and the way that has changed our ability to function economically in the city is, and in the region overall, is incredibly important and needs to be addressed. I don't know how much flexibility we have in terms of city streets as truck routes. Certainly we have lots of designated truck routes already. I'm sure they will see much heavier use. Those are streets that are designed and engineered to handle trucks, right? They're built out to handle that weight. They have the ability to make the turns at key intersections. And so it's not as simple as simply saying, oh, sure, we will allow trucks to be here, there, or the other, when they literally can't move through those spaces safely and effectively. They tear up the street, and if you do so, 1, they get stuck. 2, it tears up the streets and infrastructure, and it results in massive costs for us to fix. 3, it has huge impacts on people's property, right, on their homes, on their businesses. To have that kind of vehicle running for months where it hasn't gone before. So there's significant consequences. So mindful that we need to do what we can to be flexible where we can. It seems like working within our existing truck routes is the best way to accomplish that.
Liam?
Yeah, so I'll say like one of the first projects I worked on when I came to City DOT at the request of the state legislature was updating our truck route wayfinding signage. We had always had signage up to let the truckers know, no, you can't go here. But we didn't have signage that said, hey, to stay on the right route, take a right here, take a left here. So all that is to say is these truck routes are critically important. Baltimore City was founded as a trade hub, so commerce is very important to us. So the truck routes help continue that commercial flow, but they also help keep the commercial trucks out of the residential communities. That's important. In terms of expanding the truck routes, that would have to go through city council ordinance, change the city code. You know, I'm open to looking at it, but I'll tell you what, it's gonna be really controversial. And I'll say my preference is with the Key Bridge closed, that the majority of the truck traffic that was using the Key Bridge utilize 695. This is especially critical for hazmat. There should be no hazmat trucks going through Baltimore City at all.
One of you mentioned the red line. You know, what is the, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with red line. What's the city council's role in either supporting or not supporting the red line project? Mark, why don't you start?
Sure. So recognizing that by the time any of the three of us would take office will be in December, the current Red Line leadership, Allison Berkheimer is the project lead. She shared that their goal is to announce the manner, the mode of bus rapid transit or light rail this spring, and to announce the routing in the fall, which are the kind of the two big questions that impact what the future of the Red Line will look here across the First District. So those decisions will be made prior to us getting there. My understanding, my sense of the role of the city council person is going to be critical the next 4 to 8 years, however long construction takes, is really making sure that the community is front and center in all those conversations, right? That decisions that are being made in Annapolis, decisions that are being made on the federal level, that the council person's role is to make sure that during construction, after construction, that in every level decision making, our well-being, our needs, our ability to live and function in the midst of a massive construction zone isn't lost and forgotten while people are throwing around big money and big ideas.
Liam?
So I think, you know, Mark made some good points there. Definitely on the community collaboration side, we have to make sure that the design and public engagement process is front and center with all of our communities. But I also think on the city council and as city leaders, we have to have a bit more swagger in terms of engaging the state of Maryland. I've been very disappointed throughout this process where we've been told, hey, we're getting the red line back, but you know what? We might not be able to afford light rail, or you know what? We might not be able to afford the tunnel because the state's broke. Well, guess what? That's not our fault. You canceled our project 10 years ago, and you cut our HUR 10 years ago. The transportation money in this state is not being sucked up by Baltimore City. So we should not have, the state should not be balancing the transportation trust fund on the backs of Baltimore City. We need the best project for Baltimore. Light rail, absolutely. The downtown tunnel, you bet. We need to fight for that. And I think the city council members need to truly be representatives of Baltimore City and not be afraid to push back against the state when they don't give us what we deserve as Baltimoreans.
Joe?
I think it's very simple. If elected, my role will be to advocate for what the 40,000 people here want. What do you all want? So we've knocked every door that we could possibly knock, and the overwhelming response is if the people live closer to Boston Street, they don't want it there. If they live along Eastern Avenue and Fleet Street, I talked to one person who actually wanted it there. So we gotta make sure that we're not. Yeah, so we've got to make sure that we're not being dictators and that we're not driving things down our throats. I know that sounds like not in my backyard syndrome, but what's worse than that? It's forcing something onto someone that they don't want it. And second, I'll say this too. The state is cutting the budget by $3 billion. Where is that money supposed to come from? That's my question to everybody here. Where is that money supposed to come from? This federal study was done over 20 years ago. Was started 20 years ago. Things have changed since then, guys. And so I do have a possibility for the red line, but I want to maximize the ridership. So if they're going to have a MARC station at Bayview, let's go straight across the city along where Pulaski Highway is. And guess what, guys? On the west side of the city, that's where it's supposed to come out. It's supposed to go out to Edmondson Village, the Highway to Nowhere, and out to Social Security. So let's have it go straight across and connect to the Howard Street Light Rail. Thank you.
Go ahead, you can answer the question. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And wait, and go ahead. And then I'm going to go to Liam. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate it. So I want to, with lots of respect for the folks up here sharing the stage in this race with me, I want to make sure that we're dealing with practical reality a little bit too, at least from my understanding of it. And they may disagree with me, which is totally fine. There is no financial way, no matter how robust and aggressive and proactive we get with the state, and I appreciate Liam saying that, there's no financial way a tunnel through downtown Baltimore is part of this project, right? The costs have risen so much since then. There's no way to make that work. There is a way to make light rail work. The numbers that they put out last fall showed a really good return on investment by all their federal metrics and state metrics for running light rail through here. The red line is either going to happen along Boston Street, along Fleet and Eastern, or it's not going to happen at all. That's just the reality. I'm not saying that Joe's plan isn't a fine plan, but the decisions around that have already passed. And so we have to deal with the reality of whether this is what we want and what we need, or if we need to move, or if we need to walk away from it.
Liam, wait, hang on a second. Liam, you were going to talk about funding.
Yeah, and I respect the pastor for him sharing his concerns, but I'm a big believer of where there's a will, there's a way. And I want to say right now, over 40% of the toll revenue in the state of Maryland is generated by our two tunnels. It's probably going to be 50% now that the bridge is gone. So we generate an outsized proportion of the Transportation Trust Fund revenue. The other thing that we have to understand as Maryland taxpayers is we pay hundreds of millions of dollars every year to support WMATA, Washington Metro Area Transit Authority. And that's great, that's the nation's capital. Of course we're going to support their subway and their buses. What's frustrating is the state took our transit agency, MTA Maryland, and their biggest capital project for the past 10 years has been building DC a new light rail line. That's unacceptable. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, if we need to seek legal action to enforce Title VI compliance of the Civil Rights Act, then so be it. And we'll build the tunnel that way.
Joe?
Yeah, so I've actually had a conversation with State Senator Bill Ferguson about this, and he is in agreement with me, at least when I talked to him privately, that we need to pump the brakes. I understand that Wes Moore wants this to go through. He wants to have something on his resume for when he runs for president. But honestly, we need to pump the brakes. We need to redo the federal study and make sure that it's practical, that we're maximizing the ridership, and that we actually have the money to do this, okay?
Anybody want to rebut that?
They got to build the red line.
Hey, I had folks on my radio show not too long ago that have an idea that we already have a tunnel, so why not use it? And to connect to the tunnel and go across more of the northern route to a Bayview MARC station. In any event, we need a MARC station at Bayview. Amen to that. All right. This gets us to the population question, because obviously you can increase population if you have better transportation. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. Actually, wait, before we get to that, somebody sent a card and said, what's more important to the city, the red line or the new Key Bridge? Single answer only. Mark?
Sure, the Key Bridge.
Joe?
Key Bridge.
Liam?
Can you ask the question again? Just so I
What's
make
more
sure I hear it.
important? Key Bridge?
What's more important
The Key Bridge or the red line?
in terms of rebuilding it?
Just-
I would say the red line. I mean,
Okay.
clearing the channel is really important, but to Baltimore City, the red line's more important, in my opinion.
Okay, all right, let's get to population. We all know the city has lost population for over a long period of time. So we've had a couple of questions from the audience related to this. One of them has to do with how do you make the city more desirable for families? Let's see, Liam, let's start with you.
So I think we've hit on a lot of them today, but obviously public safety, obviously public education. And I can say just from experience growing up in Northeast Baltimore, we loved our neighborhood, we loved where we grew up, but around the time my older brother was getting ready for high school, we weren't sure if a magnet school was going to work out, and we were zoned for Northern High School. Northern High School doesn't exist anymore. I mean, That's how bad it was. So my family made the decision at the time, looking out for us, to leave the city. I'm happy to have moved back immediately after graduating college, but we have to have safer neighborhoods. We have to have good, high-quality public schools. We have to have great parks and great recreation centers, not just boxes that are, with like a basketball hoop. I'm talking about some of the great stuff we've done down in Cherry Hill and at Cahill, inviting places with big windows. I'm really big on capital investments. So we're going to invest in Patterson Park. We're going to invest in Canton Waterfront Park and truly make our neighborhoods welcoming to families. And that includes the traffic calming and the complete streets part as well. But I do think the city needs to make these investments. These are critical investments that must happen.
Joe?
I think everyone in this room knows the answers to this. It's public safety. It's decreasing the property taxes. We're at 2.248%. The surrounding counties are around 1% or lower. People can't afford to live here. It's also the schools. And what are our taxes going towards? The services. Do you all believe that your taxes, you're getting what you're paying for? And then what happens? The people move into the other counties because they feel like they're getting the services that they're paying for. That's why we're losing people. We used to have 950,000 people in this city. We've lost 400,000 people in 70 years. And we have to figure out a way to bring people back into this city. That's my time.
Mark?
It's a really interesting dynamic where our communities are growing, our families in here are coming, being attracted here and staying. Meanwhile, we're watching the rest of the city hollow out. And so it's not we talk about these top line numbers in the city, but it's much more dynamic and interesting than that, right? Some of that's driven by immigration here in Southeast Baltimore, but a lot of it's driven by having functional, livable communities where there's a reasonable expectation of safety, where the school down the street is one where you feel comfortable sending your child and thinking that they're going to have a reasonable expectation of success, where there's a quality of life here in terms of walkability, in terms of multiple transportation options, in terms of the parks that we have and opportunities to be connected in community. We know what livable communities look like, but we have effectively abandoned huge swaths of the city and said like, oh, people there just don't deserve that. People in these communities don't deserve to have the things that people in other communities do. The path to rebuilding the city is to rebuild communities, right? Is to deal with vacant housing, stabilize communities, improve public safety in those areas, and make real, solid, long-term investments in turning communities around. This is not magic either. There are organizations across the city doing this incredibly well. Southeast CDC up in Elwood Park, Rebuild Metro up in Johnson Square and Oliver. There are organizations that have shown us what this looks like over time and have begged the city to be a partner in rebuilding our communities.
What do you think the cause of the sustained population loss is? Go ahead. This is actually a question from the audience. What's the cause?
So is it back to me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if you look at the actual communities that have been losing population in the last 2 decades, right? They have been working class to middle class, predominantly black communities in East and West Baltimore, right? And so you say, well, what's happening in those particular communities? The city has mostly walked away from providing effective services there, from providing safety that people can count on. We've been closing schools, we've been closing until recently in a lot of those communities, been closing rec centers, been not investing in public transportation or in access to jobs in those communities. And so we have watched people leave and then decided to pull resources, and then watch more people leave and decided to pull more resources. And the long term of that, right, is you have a city that's half alive and half dead, and no city has ever done well like that, right? So unless you decide at some point policy-wise to invest time, energy, and political leadership in stabilizing, rebuilding abandoned communities, then that trend just continues in those places until they're completely hollowed out. And the people that live there don't deserve it, and the city can't be the city it needs to be like that.
Joe, what's the cause?
It's multiple causes, and I think I just addressed them. It's public safety, so our crime rate has been through the roof historically. We have to address that. We have to get through this consent decree. It's the longest consent decree in the history of consent decrees. The longest one ever took 11 years to get through. We're on year 8, so it's going to be at least 3 years. We have to get through this, but we need our other agencies to help out. We need the Sheriff's Department to continue to help out, issue citations, have quality of life crimes actually holding people accountable. And then the other thing too is, like I said before, the services. Liam talked about this as well. We just have inadequacy in our city government. We have so many vacancies. I actually want to introduce not just a property tax cut, but incentives for all city employees, including Liam, to have property tax benefits to live here, to improve the social fabric of our city, and to offer business owners incentives to live here, and also to hire people who live here, because our second largest set of revenue is the state income piggyback tax, and I want that to be the #1 source of revenue, and that is a product of population and income. And the more people that we have here that are also working here, the more revenue the city will get.
Liam?
Joe, you might have earned my vote with that Baltimore City property tax credit for employees. But in all seriousness, look, my degree at Towson University was actually not poli-sci, it was metropolitan studies. We studied metropolitan studies across the nation. And what happened to Baltimore City wasn't unique from a historical perspective. The federal government subsidized suburbanization through the GI Bill, through the interstate highway effort, and then Brown versus Board of Education scared white people essentially, and that contributed to white flight. What's unique with Baltimore was, at the time, our inability to annex additional land. And I'm not advocating for us to have that authority, but I want to say the population decline, as concerning as it continues to be, I think we can say that it is stabilizing and the city's economy is improving. I serve on the board of Live Baltimore, and I'm very happy that during my tenure on the board, we have shifted our focus from promoting home ownership to actually growing the city's population. So whether you're in an apartment or in a home or in a condo, who cares? You're a Baltimorean. Come here and live here. The encouraging sign that we've noticed is even though the population has declined, the number of actual households has increased. We're at the bottom of the bell curve after that 70-year period of decline. We have a long way to go, but the good news is we're going in the right direction, in my opinion. Thank you.
You've, a couple of you mentioned the property tax issue. Obviously, yes, the city's property tax is double everybody else. There will likely be a ballot question on the ballot that will force the reduction of the property tax through a referendum. And so my question is, you know, on this, I mean, how do you deal with the loss of revenue that would come from a reduction, somewhat of a sudden reduction, even though I think it would be over time, but a reduction in the property tax? Liam, let's start with you.
Sure, and I think when we look at our municipal budget, this year it's roughly $4 billion. 3.4 billion is operating, roughly 600 million is capital, so that's construction, roads, your water system, et cetera. The thing that's concerning about the proposal is a drastic cut over 7 years to the property taxes hits our biggest fund, which is the property tax fund. And there is risk associated with it, but I've decided personally that I'm gonna let the voters make this decision because it's our job in city government and city leadership. We work for you. And if you want lower property taxes, it's gonna be our job to figure it out. And I'm fully committed and fully confident that we can work with whatever plan is presented to us and will minimize impact to city services. I will not stand for any layoffs of any public workers, and I will not stand for any cutbacks to employee benefits. One thing that we could do to help address the gap early on is eliminate the over $109 million worth of tax credits that we currently issue. So then we would have a more transparent tax code. If you address those tax credits, that's going to buy us enough time for those new property assessments to come in and help us transition to this new property tax rate.
Mark?
So I'm going to disagree a little bit with my friend Liam, and that's to say that the proposal, the New Baltimore proposal this fall, needs to be fought at every level of the city of Baltimore with everything that we have. No city, no business, no household has ever functioned when you take revenue as one decision point, and then 6 to 8 months later, you start to talk about what you're going to do with your spending. Right? Those two things go hand in hand. It's reckless to have a 50% property tax cut on the ballot in the fall and pretend like that doesn't impact our ability to pay for our police officers, our ability to pay for other first responders, our ability to pay for our schools, our ability to maintain our streets and build the kind of communities that we want. Liam on his website said, we'll just raise other taxes and we'll see no net revenue decrease because we'll just raise other taxes. In the end, we'll just be shuffling things around, right? Taxes won't be less, we'll just have lower property taxes but higher other things, which is why you can afford to not have layoffs or service cuts, which I don't want either. But I am committed to seeing our property tax rate decrease over time. Since our last property tax cut in 2013, we've seen a 33% increase in property tax revenue over 22% inflation, right? So 11% of real increase in property tax revenue. We have turned none of that back into property tax relief for you or for me or for businesses or for new people that want to move into our community. We have to be dedicated over the long term to taking additional increases in property tax revenue and turning it year after year after year into property tax relief.
I have to be the leader on this issue. This is another reason why I'm running. I actually do agree a little bit with Mark here. I think Renew Baltimore is a little bit too aggressive. I want to do it over a 10-year period, not a 6 to 7 year period. And also, in looking and examining our budget, so we have about 20 different sources of revenue. Most of them are driven by population. So we need to address and have policy that brings people into this city. And as I said before, part of the population decline is resulting from the property taxes. So we do need to, I want to decrease them from 2.248 down to 1.25. Well, guess what, guys? That's still the highest rate in the whole state. The next highest in this area is Baltimore County. It's 1.1%. So doing that over a 10-year period, we won't have the shortfalls. But at the same time, I want to increase revenue elsewhere. As you may know, the state is granting us the ability to allow to have a vacant property tax. We need to make sure that we're addressing this issue, but also increasing other forms of revenue. So if we're increasing the population, our state income piggyback tax amount will go up. If we're hiring more people who live in the city, that will go up. Also, our number 6 form of revenue is the state recordation, the recordation tax, and more sales of homes and property will increase that amount as well. Like, go to my website because I can talk about this for hours.
Let's talk about city services and response, which gets a lot of complaint in many ways. So how do you better hold, and this is really a role of the city council in many ways, is to hold agencies to account for better customer service, a good way to put it. Joe, why don't you start?
Sure. So one of the things I do right now, some of you know, I do my cop walks, and one of the things that actually we do more so than just looking at past crimes is reporting 311 issues. And so if I do get elected, I'm going to map out with all the community associations, the 12 major community associations, a cop walk, a monthly cop walk. We're going to put in the 311 requests. If there's 311 requests that aren't being attended to, we will have a file. This is not an original idea. Z. Cohen does this already, but we're going to have more and more accountability, holding people's feet to the fire. And what my friend Liam over here will tell you too, we need more people in city government. So there's hundreds of thousands of 311 requests that go through every year, and we need more people to be able to address them. So like I said before, we need to offer higher pay and higher benefits for our city employees, attract the best people to become city employees, and make sure that they stay here.
Liam?
So first and foremost, customer service should just be a given. Before I started in city government, I made minimum wage working at a grocery store. And you better bet that I was always nice to people. So it's unacceptable when people are rude. But really what this comes down to is finding ways to attract and retain talent in city government. Sometimes that's compensation. Sometimes that's more competitive benefits. I know from my parents both being city workers, my mom's here, the city's paternity and maternity leave is terrible. So if we want our neighborhoods and our public to be better families, why aren't we walking the talk in city government and attracting talent that way? Another thing that I want to say is during my experience working in city government, the best career decision I ever made was go to city DOT because I started to see how the city council engaged the agencies. We are constantly getting yelled at by the council. Hey, why don't you get this road resurfaced? Why don't you fix this sidewalk? Why don't you do this? And I would be like, hey, excuse me, councilman, or council member, or councilwoman, you approved the budget where we're really underfunded. So it really takes leadership at City Hall. If you want to focus on customer service or a particular service issue that's important to the public, you have to apply the resources necessary to tackle the problem. That doesn't happen often enough. The city's not broke. Okay.
Mark?
Sorry.
Mark?
I really appreciate the question. I mean, this comes up over and over again, and it ties into the taxation question. Lots of people across Southeast Baltimore would say, listen, like, I love where I live. I love my community. I don't mind paying the taxes so much as I mind getting nothing from the city in response for it. I'd be glad to pay my taxes if I felt like the city was an active partner in improving and taking care of my community, right? Which is an incredibly healthy attitude. So then we as the city, somebody trying to join the city, have to take that seriously and follow up on those concerns. I've been working with a neighbor on the east side of Highlandtown who's been having a ton of issues with dumping and also with city crews simply not picking up recycling. And it feels somewhat personal. We've gotten supervisors involved. We were able to use a community safety grant. She has a business there to install some cameras, so now we can actually watch what's going on. But it takes that attention to detail on an individual basis to try to figure out what's falling short and what we can do to fix it. Underneath that, then you start seeing systemic issues, and you say, okay, like we've been handling this number of calls for street tree cleanup, which was taking, or tree cleanup was taking like 2 years, I think, in current 311 requests, right? And so, okay, so what's the issue there, right? What's the staffing vacancy? What's the process there that's slowing things down? And then as a council person, you work on the systemic issues behind that. I'm incredibly proud to have the support of AFSCME, the City Municipal Workers Union. I'm going to prioritize recruitment, especially within the city, especially of young adults and young people that are filling our communities here in Southeast Baltimore, to recruit them for public service, to be part of the solutions of making our neighborhoods better, especially immigrant young people.
One of the mayoral candidates likes to say that people would work in the offices 5 days a week. Do you support the policy that puts city employees in the office 5 days a week? Joe?
I actually don't really have much of an opinion on this, except for, you know, if people are working virtually and are accustomed to working virtually, that's fine, as long as they're working efficiently. If I do get elected into office, I would definitely examine this and make sure that we're getting the most out of our people. But if you can answer calls at home, you can answer emails at home. If there is a position where there needs to be face-to-face interaction with our citizens, then yes, they should be at the office as much as possible. But yeah, I would allow for flexibility because since COVID, I believe that people are just accustomed to that, and we shouldn't force people, especially when we have such a hard time retaining our employees in the city. We shouldn't force them to have to show up every day in the office if they can work from home.
Mark?
I don't think a one-size-fits-all kind of mandate saying that every single city employee needs to be in the office 5 days a week is necessary. At the same time, I think anybody that works regularly with city agencies has noticed a significant decrease in responsiveness and the ability of teams on the city side to collaborate effectively. I've experienced this directly in terms of trying to work through the permitting process. We were rebuilding 2 arson-damaged homes on Clinton Street to turn them into refugee housing and a new expansion of our preschool. And it was incredibly difficult to get the different reviewers to even talk with each other. And so when we would ask about why, they're like, well, I'm working from home, I'm working from home, I'm working from home. And so the natural teamwork and communication systems that develop over time were simply lacking. I think the other aspect of that is we need to make sure that because there's so many vacancies and so much turnover in city government, the ability to pass down institutional knowledge about how to get things done, how to serve the community effectively, simply isn't there if you can't gather people together, pass down institutional knowledge, share information, build a sense of collaboration and teamwork. It's really hard to do that with new people if you're completely remote.
Liam?
So it's going to vary from position to position. You have certain positions that absolutely need to be there every day. Firefighter, police officer, DPW, laborers, they don't have the option of working from home. For your white-collar workers, I do think that there should be an option for hybrid work schedule because, again, this goes back to attracting and retaining talent. How is Baltimore City going to be competitive for some of these positions. If we're paying less, making people come in 5 days a week, not offering, parking or transit options, it's just silly. So you have to be flexible. And then if you make people come into the office, you have to make people collaborate. Because I'll tell you right now, a lot of times we go into the office and we're taking Teams meetings from our desks. Does that make any sense? Not to me.
Yeah, it's not the only workplace where that happens, certainly. Let's talk about Harbor Place in the little bit of time we have left. City Council, the existing City Council approved the 3 bills related to the proposal that's on the table. And there will be a referendum on the ballot. But this is, if the voters approve the construction of residential units on the site, this will be an ongoing process. And actually, this is going to be a 2-part question. So, what is your opinion of the plan to redevelop the Harbor Place site to include residential housing? Liam, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so honestly, when I saw the proposal, and I would describe it as a concept, I was pretty excited about it. Because I ride my bike regularly around the promenade, and I will do the whole loop around the Inner Harbor, go to the Light Street and Pratt Street pavilions. And while those areas are very populated in terms of pedestrian activity on a hot summer day or a nice spring day, the pavilions themselves leave a lot to be desired. So I do think an overhaul is needed, and I know for a fact that the promenade itself has essentially reached the end of its useful life. So the Inner Harbor, as we know it, is going to change. I hate to break it to people. The issue of the housing at the property, to me, it's really not as controversial as some people are making out to be, especially if the new housing is going to be subject to the city's new inclusionary housing legislation. Doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. We'll have some market rate units, we'll have some affordable units at the Inner Harbor, ground floor retail, and then the proposal altogether, if you remove the Light Street slip lane, you're going to see an expansion of public open space. So I think there's been some misinformation, and I'm an optimist who thinks we can get this done the right way and have ample public benefit.
Joe's been taking notes. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to say this too earlier about the property tax question, about just the problem with some of these referendums that people are pushing on the city government. We elect government officials to help make these decisions. Obviously, they want to get input from their constituents, but the problem with referendums is a lot of people just vote yes on everything, and so that's the problem that I have with the Renew Baltimore referendum possibility. I want to make sure that people are educated on this. We need to make sure that the biggest experts are making these decisions. And that's the problem I have with this too, is that I want to make sure that we have our housing experts, our development experts who are helping make these decisions. I'm against the residential. We have 18.7 acres there. I want to see public use space as much as possible, as much green space as much as possible. I was recently in New York last year. I was visiting my aunt before she died, and I went to Highline Park. I went to the Hudson Yards area where they redeveloped it. I'd like to see something like that where we are reimagining that area, having as much green spaces as possible downtown, and also maybe something like Little Island where the Highline Park goes out to, and that also will gravitate people from Camden Yards and Raven Stadium.
Mark?
Appreciate the question. So I grew up 3 blocks from Inner Harbor, and it felt like it was built to be my playground as a kid. Everything kind of came into being there in the 80s as I was growing up there in South Baltimore and Otterbein. And so it's a place I think that has deep meaning for me, but I think it has deep meaning for everybody in Baltimore because it's a place that belongs to us. That's built into our charter. It's also built into the way that we have used and managed that space over time. I think there's a few things to say about the current plan. I'm not opposed to residential in the space. That's not the inclusion of some residential isn't the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is how much residential, the size and scale of the buildings, and the way in which the space overall is being used or is not being used and designed for the benefit of the entire community. There's been a huge failure of leadership on the part of the mayor and the city government on the Harbor Place redevelopment. We have spent a ton of time on the Inner Harbor broadly, especially through Waterfront Partnership, turning green space around, improving the environmental health of the harbor itself through the Healthy Harbor Initiative, bringing events, rehabbing Rash Field. We have made a ton of progress on the inner harbor overall, while Harbor Place sat there rotting, waiting for us to have the opportunity to put into receivership and do something with it. When that time came, the mayor initiated no planning process, didn't use the planning department to do anything, had no public forums, issued no public leadership, passed it off to somebody, David Bramble, who he thought could take care of it for him instead of leading on the issue.
So the second part of this question, which Liam mentioned, is that the infrastructure. So are you in support of the city committing dollars to the improvements of the infrastructure? Go ahead, Mark.
I am. So the reality is that whatever happens there at whatever scale, whatever the final plan is that gets implemented, the underlying infrastructure is aging and in bad shape. The promenade itself, and Liam alluded to it, the costs involved and the engineering involved. So I was talking with Lori Schwartz from Waterfront Partnership in particular. It's going to be a massive, costly project, especially to try to build resiliency in the face of climate change and continuing climate impacts there at the center of our city. In addition, the roads there are way too big. They're not built on a human scale. Hopefully we have a red line running through that same area, turning more of that space over to public use and public parks, and lowering barriers to access for people coming from the rest of the city across those streets and being able to access easily the park. The waterfront area is really important. And so we have, setting aside the project itself, we as a city have legitimate infrastructure needs that we need to invest in there to continue to make that a really important, vibrant, lively, accessible, safe public space for the next generation of people.
Joe?
Absolutely. I also think it's going to be part of the increase of the Greenway project, the Greenway Trail project as well, and having more accessibility from other neighborhoods to downtown. He mentioned climate change as well. So if we're going to have climate change, I really don't think a good idea would be to have residential property right up against the water there.
Liam?
So I sat in on the hearing for the various pieces of legislation. The interesting thing was the development team that testified said that they weren't going to be seeking any city dollars for any of the infrastructure improvements. So if they're saying that, then let's keep that money and spend it elsewhere. Let's spend it in the first district. Now, I think the devil's in the details, but if they have a financing plan and a partnership with the federal government to pay for the promenade and the state of Maryland to pay for some of those infrastructure improvements that have been alluded to on Pratt Street, I say we keep the local dollars for much needed projects elsewhere. You know, the one thing I'll say about Mayor Scott is he perhaps maybe wasn't as focused on the Inner Harbor because it is a major proponent of his administration, the push for equity and focusing on all neighborhoods across the city. So I just want to give him some kudos there. Thank you.
We're coming to the end, but so this is, you get a 1 minute to answer this question. There was a recent survey that asked city voters, city people who responded to the survey is, how optimistic are you? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Mark?
Oh, personally? I'm very optimistic
about the city of Baltimore.
Yeah, no, I'm very optimistic about the city of Baltimore.
The future of the city of Baltimore.
Yeah. No, I'm very optimistic. I was not surprised, after all the conversations we've been having around the first district, I wasn't surprised by that survey result. And just having spent a lifetime here in the city, right, we may be very aware of the flaws and the deficiencies in the work that we have to do as a city of Baltimore, and yet we love it, and that's why we're here. And not only do we love it, but we're committed to its well-being, to its future. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about the city, especially the east side of town. There are great community redevelopment projects happening all across the 12th, 13th, and 1st districts. And I think the east side of town in particular over the next 10 years is going to be remarkably transformed. We're going to see a lot more people, a lot more families, and distinctly more livable communities. It's exciting.
Joe?
I'm currently pessimistic, and that's why I'm running. And I want to be optimistic. I really do. But we need to worry about our financial sustainability as a city. We need to worry about the population loss. Otherwise, we're going to end up like Detroit, and we're going to be bankrupt. I have a plan in place to increase other forms of revenue outside of the property taxes and make it more equitable for all people of all incomes, to bring more business into the city, to lower crime. And that's why I'm running. So yes, I'm currently a little pessimistic. Maybe it's because I'm the public safety chair and I see all the crime that happens in the city. But I really want to turn it around. I care more about everyone in this room than I do care about myself. I really mean that. I'm an Eagle Scout. I was raised to put other people in front of me, and that's why I'm running.
Liam, it's maybe your is a closing statement, but go ahead. Go ahead. Are you optimistic?
My mom, who's here, and my brother would say, I've been optimistic my entire life about the city of Baltimore, and I haven't been more optimistic about Baltimore's future than really right now. This is an exciting, exciting time. We do have the replacement of the BMP tunnel coming, the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. We are going to reimagine the Inner Harbor. The Orioles are winning again, thankfully, and people are coming downtown. And the Ravens, you know, we'll get a few more playoff wins this year, I'm feeling. But in all seriousness, it is exciting, and the fact that Baltimore has these challenges and problems to solve is really what attracted me to city government in the first place. So I've been here fighting the fight for well over a decade in city government and volunteering in our neighborhoods, and I'm extremely optimistic about Baltimore's future.
Okay. You each have 2 minutes to make a closing statement, and we'll go in the same order. Liam, why don't you start? And maybe you just gave part of it, but you each have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
No, that's great. And I just want to say again, it's been an absolute honor and a privilege to participate in tonight's forum. I want to thank all of our community leaders for organizing it. You guys are volunteers and working your tails off. And I don't know if Greektown was mentioned, but I see Tricia here. Greektown was also a sponsor of the event. As I said earlier, this is probably the most competitive individual district in the city, and it's because we all here have extensive community experience, and we're all working hard. My community experience involves working in Greektown as the community president for 4 years, being a reading partner at Halliburton Academy and Westport Academy, serving as chair of MTA Citizens Advisory Committee, coaching John Rohr's Little League team. Those are just some notable examples on the community side. But really what sets me apart from the competition is my extensive experience within city government. We have to take a step back and look at this race. I'm the candidate who actually has legislative and policy experience, a track record of getting things done, the I-83 speed camera bill, working with our partners in Annapolis to get more highway user revenue, establishing the city's electric vehicle work group where we're going to have an electric vehicle charger program. I could go on and on and on and on about all of these progressive, forward-thinking, transformative policies that actually have a measurable, positive impact on the people of Baltimore. I would be so honored to have the opportunity to be your representative, and I can assure you, you would not be disappointed in my ability to move the needle on real, meaningful things that are going to help this city. You would not be disappointed. So again, I want to thank you all again. And this is a really, really special area of the city, Southeast Baltimore. It's a beautiful part of town. And again, it would be an absolute honor to be your representative on the city council. Thank you so much.
Joe?
Thank you, everyone, for coming. So the overarching theme to my policy is I want to ensure population stability, public safety. I want to expand the block captain program that we've done in Canton to the whole district. And I want to bring back not just the public safety task force, but other task forces that we've had in the past. I want to introduce an economic development task force that brings together all 2,000 businesses we have here in this district and gives them a say, and that can help flow through to legislation for the Economic Development Committee that I actually want to serve on. I also have been a rec council president and a treasurer as well. We currently only have 4 rec councils here in the city. I want to expand that model throughout the whole city to all 275 neighborhoods here. And what will that do? It'll increase parental involvement. It's parents who are running those rec council boards. It's parents who are running those programs. It's parents who are coaching those kids. And it can also be both visual and performing arts. I would partner up with Highland Town's Art District to have more programs for art. I would offer incentives for live music at any business, not just certain bars, as well as art galleries 4 times a year. And what will this do? This will improve our social fabric. I also want to expand Judy Centers. We currently only have 11 Judy Centers in the city that offers a wraparound services to both not just students, but also entire families. I'm going to hire a social worker. He or she and I will be on the street every day when we're not in City Hall. We'll be addressing the truancy issue among juveniles. We'll be addressing addiction and mental health issues directly, and hopefully decreasing the call volume for both our police and our EMTs. Lastly, William Donald Schaefer, he used to have in his office a toilet seat that said, "Do it now." I will also have that, but it'll have my last name on it. And when you think of Hakeem, you think of garbage. When you think of Joe or Kohler, you think of crap.
Go ahead, Mark.
I appreciate it. So it's interesting with how much the city is changing these days. There's a lot of people, political insiders, both inside governments and in the donor class, who are really committed and invested in huge ways in keeping things exactly the way they are, right? Who are satisfied with the way things are, with low expectations of our council, with even fewer results, with a pay-to-play system that exists, with priorities based on political allegiances and calculations, who are very happy to see Mr. Mosby continuing to do his thing in the councilperson's chair role, who would much rather make a fuss and blame other people instead of actually working on real solutions. Those kind of folks have a really hard time figuring out what to do with a pastor from Highlandtown. And I don't blame them. It is a weird thing. It's a strange thing. And partly it's because of the pastoring. It's also because I haven't been playing that game and I haven't been part of that system, right? I haven't been trying to accumulate favors and cultivate strategic relationships. Instead, I've spent 15 years showing up here in our community every single day, working alongside you and pouring myself into making our communities better, a better place to live, to grow up, and to raise a family. That's it. It's not complicated, right? But I get up and do it every single day because I love it and because our neighbors deserve it. I'm not a political insider, but I am an insider in our communities in a way that no one else up here, in a way that's rare in public service in general, and certainly here on this stage. I've spent my time inside the real experiences of community, of people living in our communities and trying to make a life for themselves here. All to do what I can to support people and help foster a community of shared vision and shared support for each other. I've been with neighbors inside hospital rooms as they made the impossible decision to end a much hoped for pregnancy because of a medical necessity. I've been with neighbors in freezing dark street corners as we cried and prayed and cared for each other because their son and their brother had been shot and killed. And they were just hoping for some semblance of healing and some semblance of justice from our city and from our systems.
Thank you all. Ernest, thank you for timekeeping. Thank you all for coming. Early voting starts May 2nd. Safe trip home.